Perfect. You gotta love a quick, short intro. So, without further ado, let's get back into the topic.
With that.
I think I'm right.
I feel it.
I was trying to, like, what they say, save it for the red button. You know, I ain't really want to talk off camera, because I feel what you are and what you have, the content that you kind of put out is something that is needed, especially in our community. I think, is it impactful? Of course. Rewarding, definitely. But the practices that you have is something where did that kind of come from?
Came from a lot of pain and trauma, watching my family suffer from significant losses. First being my grandfather, who was lynched in, I believe, 1935, and then seeing that affect my mother and her siblings. And then after that, losing two brothers to homicide, both were murdered. And I could go on and on, seeing friends shot in my community. And I chose not to allow myself to fall into the narrative that trauma is a badge of honor in the black community.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us as men, growing up young, you brag about what you've been through, how many times you got shot at, what neighborhood you come from. But we never really talked about the good in our lives. And I saw the ill effect of that, especially when I started teaching, training, and transforming boys into comprehensive men. I saw it start from their grandfathers to their fathers to the sons, and I chose to take a different path.
Your practices are, obviously through motivational speaking, but also through, dare I say, jujitsu? Is it karate?
Well, it's not karate. People typically label all martial arts karate, like Kleenex is tissue, but it's called the Cave of Adullam. It's centered around where King David, or David at the time he wasn't king yet, had ran from King Saul, who was trying to take his life. And history tells us that 400 men gathered unto David. He became their captain. And those men who entered that cave were distressed, discontented, and in debt. But when they left that cave, they were called mighty men of valor. So through the Cave of Adullam today, I work with boys who are mentally distressed, spiritually in debt, and emotionally just discontented. And they gather at the Cave of Adullam in Detroit, and they train. We use martial arts, judo, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, and stick fighting. And of course, everything is rooted in biblical principles to help them deal with the emotions that tend to master them in the wrong moment.
Yeah, biblical principles. Do you go as a pastor? Do you go as anybody from the cloth, so to speak?
When you say, do I go as the teacher, you mean?
Yeah, but like on Sunday, are you a preacher?
I was ordained a minister.
Okay.
But the Cave of Adullam is a transformational training academy where boys gather and the fathers come to watch the training. Instead of calling me sensei, they call me sharath, which in Hebrew means servant. And so I try not to take a position where I leave Christ to lead. And so I'm just a servant, and I go in and help boys navigate through all that they're dealing with so they can stop succumbing to their emotions and live in the moment and stop ruining their lives.
Still on the point of biblical principles, using the character in the Bible, David. He's my favorite. But there's multiple examples of fighters in the Bible. Why David?
Well, it struck a chord with me because at the time I asked my pastor, could he teach a group of men at the church on discipleship? So I'm thinking he's going to talk about Yahushua or Jesus. And he chose David and his mighty men. And the Cave of Adullam is mentioned, I believe it's one time, and then we move on to learn more about David when he takes over the kingdom of Israel, becomes king. But I stayed with that and I studied more what that Cave of Adullam represents. And it actually means it translates justice for the people, and it wasn't a random cave that prophets or David ran to. This was the cave where they felt that they would meet the Most High.
Yeah.
And so I stayed with that, and because I'm like, wait a minute, these men were already warriors when they went to the cave to meet David. So what happened in that cave to make these men transform into mighty men of valor? Men who not only could deal with their fears in the face of like danger, but also deal with their minds and their hearts because they were distressed and discontented with life as well. So I believe that this cave, which is a refuge, which is a safe space, which is why warriors would go in, because there's only one way in and one way out.
Correct.
And so I created that to give it that same opportunity for men to be courageously transparent instead of wearing the facade and with the Superman cape to strengthen us.
Who was the first man you saw show both tenderness and strength in your life?
Staying late again? Yep, got prospect calls to summarize. You really need to switch the Monday CRM.
That's a good question.
It sounds like it's a trick question.
Yeah, and I'm really pondering that. I think in the natural, I would say it had to be me. In the spiritual, it was Yeshua, meaning he was the lion and the lamb. He gave his life up on the cross for our salvation, but he's coming back as the lion. I've seen him in my life protect me when I could have died 3 times when guns were placed to my head. But then I seen him love me and be tender and let me know that I was beyond performing, that he loves me for whoever I am. And that perfect balance is what kept me here where I am today. And the reason I say myself, because men in our culture, if you go back even to when our fathers had to endure racism we've never even seen, the fact that, your child could be sold off to slavery like a puppy, and you got 9 other children you got to protect. You can't let the emotion of you losing that child deter you from being the man to protect your family. So think of all of that intergenerational trauma or repressed emotion that's held in the hearts of men, or specifically in regard to our conversation, black men, that's being transferred throughout generation. The behavioral patterns of us not being allowed to raise our children, but co-create children. So just basically a breeder. You have sex because you're strong. We want to match you with this slave because the way she's built, so we can have a stronger child that could come up. Then you see those patterns continue throughout our history perpetually. And so when you think of, you ask the question, who has been in my life that's been a comprehensive man, strong but sensitive, courageous, but also compassionate, they didn't have the opportunity. Men of our era couldn't talk like me and you talking right now. My father's era, I mean. They would go gamble. When my brother got murdered, he found out some information on it at a pool hall where everyone wears a facade. Everyone fakes it. And you understand this by being a professional athlete. You can't even convey that you're injured to your coaches because it may jeopardize your playing time. So I say myself, because I had to learn how to be more than just strong, a protector and provider, or what we would call masculine, because my mother had suffered dementia, and she needed someone stronger than providing money, someone who protected her from doctors who pushed pills on her. She needed someone to be understanding and patient and long-suffering when she would have these mental episodes where she would curse me out, saying, I would never treat you like this, talking to me like she didn't even raise me. And still I had to have the capacity or the self-control to massage her scalp and say, Mama, it's going to be okay. So I learned how to become tender, but also tough, because whenever someone tried to treat her wrong, they saw a different side of me. So I would say I was the first man in my own life to be comprehensive, to be a nurturer, and also a lion as well.
I want to have this great conversation with you, right? Where I think oftentimes as black men, we suffer from a lot of things. One being ego, but I don't want to lead with that, with this particular situation. As I go back to the actual question, is obviously the creation of what we know now as a person who's been very impactful in his world, and that's all we can ask for any man. But when you ask the question, who, and you reply, you, is that a defense mechanism? Because whether you want to agree to it or not, it could be situations in life that have shaped, mold, guided your thought process, and like, yo, I don't want to do that. Hey, I want to do this. Man, I see a empty space on the canvas here, so I'm gonna draw there. I think a lot of people feel or do not highlight what impacted them, that shaped them in a way.
You asked a specific question, though.
Mm-hmm.
You said, which man in my life was a nurturer, and what was the other one? Tough. I said, tender. A tender and tough. I said, no. It wasn't. Now, if you're asking me, have I had influential men in my life, there's a long list. See, what you're describing is a comprehensive man, and I coined the phrase because it didn't exist. Mm-hmm. As men, the gold standard in my neighborhood in Detroit was hyper-masculine. You got the girls, you got the money, you got the props. But the young man who say maybe wants to be a chef, and because he's in the kitchen trying to learn how to cook, society says that place is for a woman. You can't do that. And the hypocrisy behind that now is that the culinary arts field is dominated by men. So I answered your question specifically. However, I would be wrong to say that I didn't have men in my life to shape me. I mean, I wouldn't be here without the plethora of men the Most High provided along the path. So yeah, so it's some amazing men of all ethnicity who have poured into me. Mm. And when I say in such an impactful way, the Most High did it in a way where not one of them singularly can say, take credit for what he's done. Mm-hmm. Meaning he used a certain person until I reached here. Then another man came, then another man came, then another man came. And now I had to become that man to pour back into the next generation who needs men like me.
Right. Now, I will add...
This is actually very interesting to me. My father grew up in Detroit. And so when he's talking about how there's not really a representative of what tender and tough looks like. Um, that really resonated with me because my dad, I feel like my dad would probably fall into that same camp. My grandmother was a nurse, so she had to actually work for a period. She was actually working at three different hospitals just to try to keep a roof over their head. My dad had um, three brothers. One passed away, so I'm trying to do the mental math in my head. And so he's the oldest out of all of them. And so in order to keep a roof over their head as a single mom with three sons, she had to work at like 2 to 3 different hospitals just to kind of keep money coming in. And so because she was often gone, my dad was pretty much the leader of the household and almost like a pseudo father to them, while at the same time not having a template, a blueprint of how to be a father. And so navigating that, but then at the same time, you're in an area, of Detroit where it is tough. It's killed or be killed, right? That's the environment that they're in. And I love I love the work that he's doing because it is very much needed, especially in a place like Detroit. I can speak to that firsthand because being a daughter to a man who's had to do that to survive, it is tough because one, my dad grew up amongst men, right? He had three brothers, and so it's very different to raise a boy than it is to raise a daughter, right? When you're raising, or a girl, and it's not to say I don't want to promote a double standard, but I will say the tone that you can probably take with the teenage male, you can't necessarily take with the teenage girl, right? Point being, like with my dad, for instance, there's a saying amongst my family that my dad treats everybody the same, and that would bother me because I'm like, you can't do that, right? The way you talk to me is not gonna ride with the way you talk to my twin sister, right? She's a little bit more. I naturally have more of a persona or a personality of my dad, right? My sister, on the other hand, she's a little bit more meek, right? She doesn't really, she'll hold in what she's thinking, right? I'm like my dad to where, like, if I disagree, you're gonna know that I disagree, right? At least back then. I've God has worked with me then, but and so growing up, my point being, growing up the way my dad was forced to grow up, how that translated into now, I do have two older brothers, but then now you have two daughters. Well, you don't know, he has no template on how to raise. He already has no template on what it is to be a father because he never had that model, but then he also doesn't have the template on what it's like to raise girls because that wasn't a thing for him, right? He only had his brothers to look after. And so this translated into there was a lot of animosity between me and my dad because I didn't feel, to me in my mind, and that's why I say there's a difference between raising boys and raising girls. For girls, being nurturing is kind of where we derive our sense of love, and my dad was not nurturing. My dad was very disciplined. My dad was, this is what you have to do, this is why we have to do it, so let's get after it. And as a young girl, that's not what I need. I want to be able to lay with my dad. I want to be able to feel, to get held, to get kisses on the forehead, and to have fun. And that was not my dad, but that's because he didn't have the luxury of being that way in Detroit, right? And so my mom kind of felt in that gap, right? And so all this to basically say is a roundabout way of saying what the work he's doing is very, very important, and I love that he's focusing on young male children because that's kind of where it's kind of where it starts in a way, especially as we talk about trauma. And again, this is why I foot stomp the need for psychology. I think leaders definitely need to have some type of knowledge in that area because it's so important, especially when we try to bridge the gap between spiritual knowledge and psychological knowledge. Because again, as I mentioned in my previous video, that's how you truly walk in freedom. When you know what trauma has done and how it's affected you mentally, it helps you better fight the spiritual war that's going on. not only in America and society and stuff like that, right? But internal within you, right? You're better equipped now because you know what it is you're fighting, you know how it entered and that kind of thing, and so you're just better equipped overall to fight a spiritual war. And so yeah, I absolutely love the work he's doing.
Ask this because I've had the opportunity to sit knee to knee or across from individuals that have been pastors, have been, priests, have been doctors, have been, in their field, experts, right?
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44.
And my common question to that is, why should men listen to you? Or why should boys listen to you?
Scripture say be a living epistle. Basically, walk it out. I don't want them just to listen to me. I want them to watch me. They don't listen to what we say anyway. Children don't. They watch what we do. That's why they lost. And so I be what I want them to see. I don't have to speak it as much as I have to walk it. And that's what I believe the issue is for working with youth and men and young men for over 20 years. They see me personally when the lights are off. When I tell them to learn from the good that I do and the bad that I do. If you see me short with my wife and not patient, you don't do that. If you see me loving her, reconciling when I'm wrong, you see me sacrificing my body and my mind to pour into others, that's what we do. And so it's too much talk.
This is actually very, very important. This resonated with me so well because this is actually the pinnacle of where my atheism started, because I felt like my dad was a hypocrite, right? Because like I mentioned, I didn't have the tenderness, right? He was very for those of you who don't know, my dad was in the Army, right? Coming from Detroit, right? So you can already imagine the very man's man, the very masculine alpha mentality that my dad had, right? And so that's not what a little girl needs, right? That's probably great for a boy who you're trying to raise up to be a leader and that kind of a thing, right? But as a girl, that's not what we want, right? That's not what we need, psychologically speaking. But what I'm getting at is he talked about, it's walking it out, right? That's so important because, my dad could tell me when we would talk and we would have our disagreements and we'd go at it, he would tell me like, oh, I love you and I kill for you and this and that. And it would go in one ear and out the other. And on top of that, it would also frustrate me because I'm like, no, you don't. No, you don't. How can you treat me the way that you're treating me, but then in the same breath say that you love me? I'm like, that doesn't make sense, right? You're telling me not to drink, right? But I see you drinking. You're telling me not to. He smokes cigarettes and cigars, but you're telling me not to do those things. And so I'm like, well then, what? Like everything about you is hypocritical, right? And so that caused more conflict. It spread more rebellion, right? I became more rebellious with him. And so, like he said, he's like, oh yeah, children don't listen to you anyway. It does. It kind of creates that, that atmosphere to where I'm not going to listen to anything you're saying because you don't make sense. I don't see it for myself. And so, that's actually something that, because of that, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to bash my dad, right? Because again, he's forced to walk something out that he has no idea how it looks like. And that's very, very tough, right? So I definitely don't hold any animosity towards my dad. Like he no kidding had to do the best with what he had. Like it, so I don't fault him for that. But my point is that knowing that now, right? Because I am a psychology major, I was very intentional about making that a focus point with raising my daughter. That's one thing that resonated with me growing up was my dad never apologized. And did I push his buttons on purpose? Yeah, but because I felt like he was doing the same thing to me, so there was kind of like that tit for tat mindset. But he never apologized, even when there was times where I pushed his buttons really, really hard, and he put his hands on me, and I seen him put his hands on my brothers, and I mean really putting hands. I'm not talking about spankings or nothing like that. I mean like we were fighting, but there. I was very intentional about, because that affected me, because then he would never come back and apologize. It was like, okay, what do you guys want for dinner? And it's like, well, we're not going to discuss what just happened, right? And that bothered me, like we're not going to just move on from this, right? And so I was very intentional about raising my daughter where if I slipped up, if I was overwhelmed and I kind of just, was quick or short with them or whatever, or lashed out with them or anything like that, like, especially me being an introvert, it's tough having when I was married, I had 2 kids who were about a year and a half apart, exactly a year and a half apart. And so, my stepdaughter is 4, but then my daughter is 2. And so it's very, as an introvert, a lot of the chaos that was going around, right? I'd often get sensory overload where I'm just like, there's too much noise going on, like everybody like shutting everything down. Everybody be quiet, everybody shut up, go into your room, don't talk, I'm off duty. That's the thing. One of the things I would say was like, I'm off duty, meaning like, don't come to me about anything, go to your dad, right? And so I was very intentional about coming back to them and being like, mommy is sorry, I shouldn't have said this and I shouldn't have said that. And they're little kids, right? And so they're going to be like, oh, it's okay, mommy. So I would be intentional. No, it's not okay. It's not okay, and I have to do better, and I will try to do better, right? And so it's very beautiful to see now just what that does. That small coming back of like, hey, I'm sorry, I really should have handled that better, right? And you don't have to. I don't want to promote. People talk about soft parenting. I don't want to promote this idea of like you're erasing the discipline, right? But it's just letting them know that I'm still gonna discipline you, but there is still, I'm not perfect. Right, and it allows them now when my daughter comes in, now that I'm divorced now, so it's just my one daughter. I remember her being 3 years old, 4 years old, and coming, something happens and she's upset with me, right? And so she'll blow up and have her temper tantrum and then she'd leave. But the beautiful thing about that is she'd come back, mommy, can we talk because you hurt my feelings? And that's beautiful to see as a 3 to 4 year old because she's exhibiting an emotional intelligence that some adults don't even. Right? How many times have you tried? We see people arguing relationships and stuff like that, and they walk out the house and don't come back till 6-7 hours later. And then on top of that, they don't even discuss the issue. Right? The wife is doing the dishes all angry and slamming cabinets, and the husband is just retreating into his man cave, and it's just quiet until the next day. Right? And so to see her coming back and saying, "Can we talk about this, mommy? Because you made me feel sad, or I'm angry now, or whatever." That's beautiful. But then you also have to promote that space because I tell her your room is your room. So if you need a place where if I make you upset and you retreat to your room and you're throwing your toys on the ground, you close the door, you're not slamming the door because she knows better than that, but she's closing the door and she's having her moment, that's not on me to interrupt that because she's already a little kid and I can't get mad at her for not being able to regulate her feelings when adults can't even regulate their feelings. So if that's how she's choosing to regulate it, and she still has the wherewithal to be able to be like, okay, I know I'm mad, but I'm not going to slam this door, but I am going to scream into this pillow, that should be rewarded. Because adults can't even do that. How many times have you seen adults get mad and they're punching walls or they're slamming stuff? You know what I mean, right? So there's got to be a middle ground, and as parents, we have to be better at practicing awareness because, again, like he's getting at, and with my ultimate point is, kids do watch, they do see. So it's not enough to just be like, hey, don't drink drugs. Hey, don't cheat on people. Hey, watch your anger. Hey, don't hit females, right? You have to walk that out because they're seeing you. I think what people forget is from a psychological standpoint, kids observe before they learn how to speak. That first few 3 years before they really start being fluent in English or whatever language they're speaking, right? They're observing everything, right? They're analyzing. They don't know this, but they're subconsciously analyzing your emotions, your facial expressions. They know when you're upset. They know when you're mad. They know when you're gonna blow up. And so you got to be able to articulate that to them, like, hey, what I'm doing is not okay, and I'm trying to work on it. But then they also have to see that you're like they have to see that effort. It's not enough to just be like, hey, I'm sorry, I'm wrong, I won't do that again, and then you still slip up every single time because now you're showing them that your words don't matter, right? And so there's got to be a consistency with your awareness and with your behavior. And so I love absolutely what he's talking about because it's very, very important as parents and as leaders that we walk out what we're saying, flaws and all, right? And so very, very important what he's talking about here. I love it.
Even Yeshua, Jesus said the people don't believe because they don't see cam signs and wonders. See, the key is about living it out. Go therefore into all the nations. It's an action. Love is an action word anyway. I say love is all theory until it's been tested anyway. And so I don't want people to necessarily just follow what I say. Test my fruit. And when they test my fruit, they'll say then that the Lord is good.
In this directive of, certain practices and certain teachings, it's a constant reminder because I was raised in church, right? Father was, still is a pastor, bishop. And Pentecostal, I mean, church all day. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
And I would be open to say this, even though my religion and Christianity gave me so much of a foundation of what and what not to do, it also handicapped me to being the first figure of judging. You know what I'm saying?
Break it down.
So there's a common phrase in church when I was going to church that's not of God. That ain't of God. That ain't. And I would always quit like, but what does that mean? And when you talk to churchgoers, it's a holier than thou type of flow. I say all that to say, your practice is Christianity.
No.
What is it?
My practice, when you're talking about the capable dilemma, who I am as a man,
Yes.
is servanthood. I'm a disciple of Christ. Christianity is a system. I am a Christ follower. You say if I'm a Christian, that literally means you're a Christ follower. I follow Christ, and I'm a servant of the Most High. Now, when you were talking about growing up in church as well, and people saying that's not of God, and this isn't of God, first and foremost, you got to know your word. Because people will always say things, and I test it with the scriptures. I always cross-reference what they say with the cross. The scriptures say, man's ways and his thoughts is not of the Most High. And so I always challenge that. People have told me, pastors, not to do the cave of Adullam, to do something else, because I think the Most High could use it that way. I went to his word, and I know I have the same Holy Spirit they say they have, and I followed him, and I'm here today. The biggest issue really isn't, again, I used to overgeneralize like all Christians are this, like I didn't come to church like you did. I hated Christians, I hated the church. I studied Islam, Egyptology, metaphysics, Hinduism, Buddhism. I would wait for the Jehovah's Witnesses to come to my door so that I could argue with them. All right? So just so you know, I wasn't raised in church. The Most High, he called me out of darkness in a way where it's undeniable, where he called me when I was 16. I had a dream in my room, and I don't want to really expound on that too tough, or do I have the time?
You have plenty of time.
Okay, brother. So here it is. I'm gifted producing music,
Really quick before he dives into his testimony here, I love that he kind of pivoted Cam Newton's mindset of because you're a Christian, because it absolutely breaks my heart that Christianity is now a system that's brought so much, right? When we hear the phrase of like church hurt, it's a system now that almost you got to be like, I hate that you have to be careful when you say I'm a Christian, right? Like there's almost a hesitation when someone asks me, so I'm active duty military, right? And so with our dog tags, they'll ask you, like what your faith is, and I almost kind of hate saying, I won't say hate, that's such a powerful word, but there's almost like that hesitation of saying Christian, because it's so much. It's such a nuanced faith because it's been misrepresented, and it's caused so much, because of that misrepresentation, it's caused so much hurt and trauma, right? That it's you already know. When I tell people I'm a Christian, I already know what they're gonna think. Oh, you're gonna you're a Bible thumper, you're gonna push your religion down my throat, and blah blah blah. And it's like that. I just hate that where the connotation has now come from when you say Christian. But so I love that he kind of steered like, I'm not a Christian, I'm a Christ follower, because that's what it is. The true, when you have a true relationship with Christ, it's not just a religion. It's not just the banner that I put on the back of my shirt. Hey, I'm a Christian. No, I actually follow Christ. I'm picking up my cross and following him, and I'm dying to myself daily. And what that really means is, as Cam says, people say things but it's like, what does that really mean, right? Dying to yourself, picking up your cross and dying to yourself every day, literally means putting down what I want to do and doing what Jesus is saying to do. Right? So for me, how that personally looked like putting down my cross, I was a very prideful person and a very rebellious person, right? As I talked about growing up. So now, right, I didn't really fully surrender to Christ until maybe, I'm 29 now, so maybe like 23, 24, 25 years old. So the first time that I've kind of was like really entertaining Christ was like around when I had my daughter, like 21, 22, right? And so when you're 21, 22, 23, that's 23 years of thinking a certain mindset and behaving in a certain way. You have to undo all of that. So for me, picking up my cross was, I'm not going to go tit for tat. someone say something crazy to me, I'm like, oh, I'm about to, I got the perfect comeback for this. I got and it's putting that down, suppressing that down, because Jesus says for me to hold my tongue. If my mouth isn't used to edify, encourage, or speak life to a person, I should hold it, right? Proverbs even tells us that the wise man, right, like you hold back your tongue. James, the book of James tells us that when two fools are arguing, you don't know the difference between the wise person and the fool, because they're both going tit for tat. So if someone walks by us, they're not going to know. They're just going to assume we're both fools, right? And so there's a wisdom in holding back your tongue, right? The Bible talks about the tongue being something that can't be bridled, right? Like how you would bridle a horse, right? And so that was my biggest thing, was every time someone said something, I had to come back, or and it was walking out like shut up, Aaron. Okay, I'm gonna shut up. I'm gonna hold my, you know what I mean? I'm gonna keep my peace, right? As we would say. And so that's your picking up your cross and following Jesus. And so it's relationship, not religion. And I hate when people ask, not hate, but I hate when there's a for lack of a better word, I'll just say hate, but that's very strong. I don't want to use that word, but it bothers me when I'm put in a situation where I just have to deduce my relationship with Christ to a religion. Oh, I'm Christian, or Church of God in Christ is what I'm classified with in terms of the military on my dog tags. And because it does God, I feel like it does God such a disservice, because he's more than that. It's not just, this is the banner I wear, right? It's a relationship. It's I'm not perfect, and I know that, and so I'm acknowledging that I need Jesus to help me be better, right? Jesus is my template. I'm striving for that. I'm not going to meet that on my own, and so I need his spirit. I need him to help me bridge that gap. That's what Christianity is, but that's not what it is in today's, like in America, that people would be like, well, no, because church is judgmental, and I didn't feel welcomed here, and blah, blah, blah. And so it truly sucks that you kind of have to almost defend your Christianity in a way, if that makes sense. So I just hate that that's where we've succumbed to in today's world. But let's get into this guy's testimony.
At the time, my first brother had gotten killed when I was 3 years old, and the trauma of that affected my mother so greatly that growing up, specifically during a time period of 1974, she couldn't give to me the affection anymore, which is understandable.
Yeah.
My brother Larry was a beautiful soul. And so imagine a 3 or 4 year old boy walking around and his mother is different and he doesn't know why. And so I share that to say that led me to a path of unresolved anger, because my father wasn't actively in my life. So any mention of church, I already had anger. Don't tell me about this loving father and my dad ain't here. Okay? So I had one dream, and I never forgot, it was an earthquake in my room. And I fell off my bed and I looked up and I saw a soldier handing me a sword and said, "We need you to fight for us." I said, "No, you got the wrong brother," right? So when I went to get on my knees to get up, I see this image of Yahushua, or Jesus, who the world calls Jesus, like covered in blood and scarred. And at the time, I wasn't studying the scriptures. So the scriptures say he was beaten beyond recognition. So even worse than what we saw in the Passion for the Christ.
Yeah.
Passion of the Christ. That's what I saw. He was in so much pain and agony that I got up on my knees and hugged him. In that dream, he disappeared and that pain shot into me. I woke up and I see my mother running to leave to go to work. And I come out and say, "Ma, I had this dream. It's the first time I'm crying at my mother." And she says, she put her purse down. She says, "Jason, the Lord is calling you, but you're running." Brother, after that, constant, he's trying to get me. Because I said, "You real? Show me."
Yeah.
Because I was upset at these churches. You spend all this money on one building, but a mile radius around your building, people are starving. So things didn't add up to me. One situation, I was in a friend of mine truck who.
This is very important, especially when he talks about, remember what I was getting at earlier, of people are watching you. People are constantly watching you. And it's almost worse now, especially in the world that we live in, because it's like one slip up and it's viral, right? How many times have we seen pastors and leaders do so much great work that goes unnoticed, and then they slip up one time and it's like, oh, now the church is gone and all this kind of stuff, right? And so, and not to say that they, right, because there's also some pastors that do some crazy things behind the scenes, right? So I'm not trying to negate that factor, right? But what I'm getting at is, if you're gonna pick up the mantle of being a leader, you very much have to do your best to walk it out. You don't have to be perfect. We're not perfect. We fall short of the glory of God every day, right? As Paul writes. But it becomes you really have to take it serious of what you're doing, because you are a template to someone else. You're a role model to someone else. And so they really have to see you doing your best to walk out what you preach, right? And so it's very, very important. I just wanted to highlight that.
NBA player now, retired, driving, trucks flipped over. Make a long story short, he didn't come with me to the studio because we was doing music together, because his mother told him someone had to get in an accident. That someone was me. And she told me then, I said, is this true? She says, yeah, he's calling you, but you're running. My friend at the time had money, would pay for pastors to come down and talk to me because he was going to the league. And I still, I don't want to live this way. And I end with this. I met my wife, had a child out of wedlock, and I needed insurance for my child. I put my music career on hold, started working. One day she called me. I was just in a bad mood, brother. I was working minimum 10 hours a day, the worst shift ever, from 2:30 to 2:30 in the morning. That's like afternoons and midnights combined, brother. And she said, Jason, don't lose the faith. I said, God ain't real. I said, if he was real, why did he gift me with all of these gifts and talents, and I'm here working in this Coca-Cola factory? I said, he fake. The only sun gonna come through the clouds is Ra, because I was studying Egyptology as well. And I hung the phone up. 10 minutes later, brother, I went to unload a high-low truck like I always would. But this time the driver didn't lock the brakes on the truck bed. I hit the truck. The weight of the high-low pushed the truck bed away from me, and I dropped down with this high-low. I got 280 discs to this day that I suffer with. I fell off. I looked up at the sky. I cried. I said, I'll never go against you again. That day, I did a 180. I went from listening to secular hip-hop to Fred Hammond, blasted in my Yukon. You can ask my wife. I was locked in. That's why I'm resolute in what I do for him. I don't allow people opinions and what they feel that God told them to tell me. First and foremost, prophecy, you need to confirm what he spoke into my life, not tell me something he ain't telling me. And so I understand how it works because I had studied it. And then when you see the Most High do miraculous things in your life, if CNN or Fox News came out and said the word of God, we just proved that it's not real, don't make me no difference, because I know it is. And so that's what I stand on, and that's why I'm even here with you. I wouldn't have got a call. I'm not here for no money. I'm a servant. He said, go see my son, Cam. I ran into Omari. You've been on my heart, brother. Even my son, you was his favorite player. He reminded me of that. You see? And he crossed my paths I was at the BET Summit, and then I see Omari. He says, hey, man, we got to get you on. And here I am, all because I chose to follow him.
Hey, Tony, why should people come to the AI Advantage Summit November 6th, 7th, and 8th?
I received that. I think a lot of times, we fall in love with the content, but not the context.
That's good.
You know what I'm saying? And I've definitely seen certain things, and I'm like, okay. And now having this opportunity, one of the content pieces that I did see was the thing that you did on Shannon Sharp, right? In long story short, if nobody's seen it, it's about temptation. Can we speak about that?
Yeah, for sure. One of the greatest downfall of man is what? Lust, sexual temptation. And unfortunately, we're unaware that science has shown us that lust, when you're a slave to it, it negatively impacts the prefrontal cortex, which affects our decision-making skills. So you look at David in his life, here it is, he's king. He had a concubine, right? Okay, many wives.
No.
Yeah, he did. Listen to
not concubine.
Concubines, I'm sorry.
Okay, there you go.
Now, look what it did to his mind. One of his warriors. Where I'm from, that's a worthy offense to kill David. You gonna sell out your boy for some sex?
Was it Bathsheba?
Yeah. And Uriah was the warrior. Because he couldn't get away with it, he had Uriah, Joab put Uriah on the front lines of getting killed. I say that because here it is, 2025. We still struggle with the same thing. My second brother was murdered, major drug dealer, millionaire. The easiest way to set up any man, easiest way to get an attractive woman. We're so foolish in the mind that we led by our penis, the lust, no sexual self-control. And so when I saw Brother Shannon, and because I don't meet these brothers, I don't speak on things that I don't know. I think that's unfair to them. I've seen someone do that about me. It's like, you didn't even understand what I was going through with my mother. All I could speak on was just the lack of sexual self-control that we all need. I see it affect the boys that I work with, how you have good fathers, but because of the lack of sexual self-control, or even deeper, brother, it falls into a lack of self-love if we really deal on a psychological level. What makes you become a Lothario or a man?
And again, just I love that he's getting to that, the psychology. See how much knowing how the brain is wired, and then knowing how God wired you, bridging those two things together. I'm telling you guys, it is so powerful. It's like, I don't know, I can't foot stomp that much. That's like my baby. And as we say in the military, it's your pet project is like your baby, as we say in the military. And so that's like my pet project there, is to just let people realize, especially me being a black woman from a culture that has so much trauma. Like, trauma is almost part of our story. Like how he said we used to kind of brag about it, right? Like, oh, our ancestors didn't conquer this for us to do this, or it was like how he said it was a badge of honor. I was shot 5 times, like with 50 Cent. We hear about him being shot 12 times and surviving, and that was kind of like, it got him street cred, right? And so coming from a culture where there's so much trauma, and to the point where it's kind of becoming your identity, it's so important, the psychology of what that does to you, and how to bridge that gap with spiritual healing, right? And so I love that how he mentioned like lust is really a self-love issue because it is. My ex-husband, that was his the thorn in his side, or I guess I really shouldn't say thorn in his side, but his stronghold really was lust, pornography, adultery, he cheated on me, that kind of stuff. And so just seeing, and I bring that up not to bash my ex, I bring that up because that's when we met, he was already very depressed. He contemplated suicide a lot. So he would constantly tell me, I don't feel like I deserve you, and I kind of hated to hear that because I felt like that's a cop-out, like you're using that to kind of sabotage our relationship. And so I already know, because he came from a spirit of rejection, because I did too, I kind of saw that already. And so I already knew off the bat that he was dealing with self-love issues, and that was before I even started studying psychology, right? So just seeing Jason bridge that gap and talking about how spiritual matters equate to psychological matters and the need to kind of bridge that gap, it foot stomps everything that I'm trying to bring out more awareness to in the world. So I love what Jason Wilson is doing here.
And who's promiscuous, that he doesn't even value his own temple, that he got to sleep with everyone else for affirmation. When I see the damage that it does to his sons, and then the ill effects of that in their graves, and then how statistics show us that homes without fathers, the boys are at a greater risk of being incarcerated, and the daughters are more likely to get pregnant young, and then also reach puberty before it's time, which is now linked, scientists say, is linked to depression. And so the reason I wanted to speak on it was not to condemn Brother Shannon. It was like, look, what can we learn from my brother?
Yeah.
And we're so quick in society, as you were saying, look at the content, but not the context. This has been going on for centuries.
Yeah.
Why does it keep happening? Brother was on his way to sign, what, a $40 million contract for a podcast, or more than that? Yeah, okay. And we still, not him, we see a good-looking woman. That just happened to us. I want to hit that.
Mm-hmm.
The scriptures say, a man without self-control is like a city without walls. In ancient times, the walls were the protection of the city.
Mm-hmm.
So without self-control, your mind is impenetrable to sin, your weaknesses, your flaws. You can't even have the foresight or the wisdom to see that if I make this decision, this is going to cost me not only my wife, my family, not only my reputation, not only my business, but most importantly for me, the scriptures say our God is blasphemed amongst the Gentiles because of us.
Mm-hmm.
I got too much to lose, hence why I teach men, it ain't...
This is exactly what I was saying. The Christianity as a faith, right? The Christian faith is blasphemed because of the misrepresentation of the church, of the people who claim to be Christians, right? And so, like he said, we're blasphemed amongst the Gentiles. In this sense, biblical speaking, Gentiles are people who didn't, it was kind of used synonymously, people who didn't either believe in Jesus, but also people who were like outside of the initial children of Israel, right, outside of that, right? And so basically saying Jesus is mocked amongst the non-believers because of the believers' behavior, right? And so King David, in my opinion, is a perfect example of this. How many times have you seen people justify polygamy because of King David and King Solomon, right? And it's like, that was not that's not Jesus' plan, right? It wasn't God's plan, because we see in Genesis where it talks about man and woman, right? One flesh, right? And so it's justifying sin, because the thing about God is he is a perfect God who has standards, right? Whether it be the law, the 10 Commandments, whether it be no kidding, like what God tells you individually, hey, this is, your mandate, this is what I want you to do, right? So whatever those standards are, he's a perfect God who has these standards, but he has to use imperfect people in an imperfect world to reach those standards, right? And so we see God, who is perfect, using an imperfect person, in whether it's King Solomon or King David, to do something. And we sit back, Gentiles sit back, people, non-believers sit back, and we're like, oh, see, it's okay to do it because God is using people who are doing those things. And that's not how that works, right? That's not how that works. It's like, we don't, if we follow that same logic, then my dad putting hands on me would be okay because, oh, Aaron turned out fine. So now when I have my daughter, Aaliyah, well, I can do her the same way because she'll turn out fine because that's what I did, right? So I can be polyamorous and still go to heaven because we see King David do it. But then yet in the scripture, it says fornicators, adulterers will not enter heaven, right? So it's like, where, you see what I'm getting at? So it's like, we got to be careful at using an imperfect man to try to validate sin because a perfect God is using that imperfect man. That's not how it works. But see, carnal mindset will tell you that it's okay to try to justify it. And that's just not how it works. And that's why you have people, as he's saying, you have people blaspheming Christianity because we're misrepresenting it. We're missing the mark, essentially. We're missing the mark.
Good enough just to be in love with your wife. It's going to keep you on the path. You got to fear the Most High. We have this concept as men, what? I'm going to hold you accountable, bro. You hold me accountable, right? Mm-hmm. That's impossible. Unless I plan to live every second of my day with you. The only one can hold us accountable, truly, is the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of the Most High. What we can do is hold each other responsible. So, if I need accountability when I ain't around y'all, when I ain't with my wife, who's beautiful, intelligent, industrious, my right hand with our nonprofit, why would I want to ever risk that? But more so, my life is over once my actions cause his name to be blasphemed. So I tell men, the key to controlling that first is to dig deep. Why you got to be promiscuous? Why do you feel that you got to sleep with every woman you see? Where does that come from? And typically when you get men to really dig deep, come from a father wound, never really getting affirmation from their dad or affection from their mother, which is the mother wound as well. Mm-hmm. Abuse, abandonment. This makes us feel good. It's the dopamine. But every time you get caught, you have a divestment of dopamine. And we're like sheep going to the slaughter. That Solomon, who else couldn't control himself, lost the kingdom.
If you live in a Colorado zip code and have 0 DUIs in the last 5 years, listen.
Over some sex, brother. And that's what I want brothers to see. But that's why I try.
I love that Jason mentioned how Solomon lost the kingdom, because people, that's like the biggest pet peeve of mine. People who love, and Cam Newton does it, when there's a couple clips of him talking about, polygamy was no big deal, David did it, blah, blah, blah. But they never talk about the effects of that. They never talk about the effects of that. The ending of that story is disastrous. The kingdom literally split into two and saw warfare after war. There was no rest, no peace. Read the book of Lamentations to see how bad things got. Mothers eating their children, right? So it's famines throughout the land, all sorts of craziness. People boiling like their flesh to eat, right, to survive. It was just it's crazy. So it was like King David, what he did, planted a seed to King Solomon, who basically was like, if you thought King David, like his use of women was crazy, like King Solomon had him outmatched by like 4 times, 5 times as much. The dude almost had like 1,000 wives and like 500 concubines, something crazy. So it was like his actions caused so much. It was generational, right? Generational destruction, because there was a promise that God was trying to. There was a promise that God was being faithful to, and those two, when I say two, I mean King David and King Solomon, their actions as it relates to polygamy, it made it that much harder for God to try to, bring that promise to fruition, right? Because now the kingdom is split in two. You have the southern kingdom, which was Judah, and then you have the northern kingdom, right, which was Israel. And so constantly seeing them, a nation that was supposed to be unified under one, right, a nation under God, is now split into two, right? And then they're later brought onto Babylonian captivity, right? So it's just, I love that he mentions that. Like, it's not all, y'all talk about polygamy as if it's this man is now walking into freedom because he's able to just, sow his seed everywhere and blah, 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 blah. And he's, helping women because he's investing in these women and he's helping them now. And so all this kind of stuff, like, it's just this perfect idea of men walking in their, like their natural, this is the way that, they were designed, right? But it's like the story didn't end well, you know what I mean? And so I just love that he's bringing awareness to that. And 9 times out of 10, I would even go out as far as to say 9 times out of 10, people who use Kings David or King Solomon, a lot of times, honestly, I've kind of heard it used more with King David, which is funny to me because I'm like, you realize he lost his throne, right? God punished him for what he did with Bathsheba and Uriah. So I'm like, it's funny how they use King David. And same thing with King Solomon. But it's 9 times out of 10, I would venture out to say that people who use those 2 kings as an example ain't read the Bible or studied it a day in their life. It's people who heard the story through like third party, right? Like, oh, my grandma who's a believer. So it's like, I don't really know the story, but I know of the story. Those are usually the ones who use that to justify their behavior. So it's just half truths, using half truths and to justify behavior that you don't want to stop. That's all it is.
I had to dig deep because we just want to just deal with the sex piece. It's not that. It's what we don't really love ourselves. Especially, I used to just think it was just us, but it's a man thing. It's brothers of all walks of life, different shades of color. We've been conditioned to be performers. From us, as far as slavery, it's just doing what masters say. Boy, get over there and have sex with Sheba. I need another slave nigga. And you go do that. That intergenerational behavior travels down the lineage. And brothers like us with influence, if we don't say it, they don't, more so than say it, if we don't show it, they don't do it.
Can we take it there?
You the one with the iPad, brother. I don't have no notes. I came here for you.
Say less.
Yeah, you my guy.
Let's take it down. I think I'm more relatable to Shannon Sharp than the average man. Life's all about leveling up. Whether I'm handling business on the field or kicking back in my zone. I like to celebrate with cigar for 40 plus years. He tells us that every Sunday dinner. Right? My mother only knows my father. Mm-hmm. My mother's father introduced my father to his calling as a pastor. And when we have heart-to-heart conversations about my inability to get married or settle down, the things that are kind of brushed away is like, oh, you don't have self-control. Mm-hmm. You don't have discipline. Mm-hmm. But I ask this, and I'll say it to you also too, Mr. Jason. When you go certain places, like people really wouldn't know who you are, respectfully.
Mm-hmm. You're wrong. No, go ahead.
No,
I'm just messing with you.
I'm trying to make a point.
Yes, sir.
And the point is, when you talk, or when there's discussions about how a man can fall victim,
yes,
it's and let me go back because that did not sound right.
No, I appreciate it. I know where you're going.
I'm not talking to you per se, but I'm talking
To the average man, right?
No. These are conversations that I have with my father.
I'm saying, I like, listen, brother,
Yeah.
I appreciated what you said.
Yeah.
I apologize for interrupting.
Yeah.
I'm saying, I understand where you're going, meaning, you brothers, the temptation is greater. Am I correct?
No, that is absolutely right.
Okay, great.
But it's one of those things that when I have these discussions with my father, a person who is the most influential person in my life, there's not things where it's like, yeah, but it's always with a but though. And going like this is the topic of Shannon Sharp, right? And I'm not saying what Shannon Sharp was good, bad, or indifferent. What I am saying is I can relate to fallen victim to the lust. And through that, when going back to the discussion of like, hey, when you go places, nobody really would know. But for me, that's a part of my lifestyle. Mixing, mingling, networking, being different places and saying, hey man, we gotta go to dinner. Dinner leads to different opportunities. Hey, let's talk about business. All right, cool. Whether it's on a golf course, whether it's in a conference room, whether it's at a bar, whether it's wherever. Business can be taking place any place. And I think the tough part is when you're actually in that situation, if you knew what you will find out, you definitely wouldn't do it. But to say, hey, you don't have discipline, that's a little triggering given the circumstances that one person has been in versus another person being in. And that's all I say.
Okay, good.
I want to call BS on that. And maybe I'm getting too ahead. I mean, he finished his thought, so maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. And he ends up clarifying it, but I kind of want to call BS on that because
future-proof your home and garden with AARP today.
You were wrong.
Jason says you were wrong, but I kind of want to call BS on that because that exactly points to what your father was trying to say about self-discipline, because you don't have self-control, because he mentions, it almost kind of sounded like what he was trying to say, and if you guys don't think that's, what he was trying to say, then by all means, throw it in the comments, but it kind of, the way I interpret it, it kind of sounded like what he was trying to say was because of his stature, right? He's a celebrity, he's a businessman, he's a football player. It almost sounded like he was saying like he's put in situations where the opportunity constantly exists for him to be unfaithful or for him to have, a promiscuous lifestyle. And it was like, you're not the only person to have those opportunities. You know what I mean? There's countless of millionaire CEOs who have beautiful marriages who've never stepped outside of their marriage. And businesses, we, especially in real estate, which is what I kind of dabble into, they constantly say your net worth is your net worth. So we're constantly going to different business meetings and, luncheons and having, these introductions and all that kind of stuff made so that way you can kind of, build that net worth, build those relationships and all that kind of stuff. And so to kind of hide behind the, we're put in positions where there's many more opportunities, it's like, yeah, so all the more reason that, if anything, if we're going to follow that logic all the way down, you should have more self-discipline than someone like me, because you're constantly thrown into a situation where you could cheat or you could be promiscuous, right? So one would argue that you should have more self-discipline because you might be in a situation where you're having dinner and cocktail parties, 30 times in 7 days. So you're constantly hit with that temptation, so you should have mastered that by now, versus someone who, is like me, who's a nobody, and now when I go to this meeting and there's millionaires, it's like, oh, that temptation comes knocking at my door because that's the first time I've been put in that situation. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, I kind of want to call BS on that. I think that's just something that you're kind of hiding behind, and I think that's probably what Jason is going to get at, but one would argue that you should have more self-discipline because you're constantly, it's almost kind of like, let's say Cam Newton drives a Ferrari, right? Growing up in the hood, someone who's poor, we look at those cars and we're like, ooh, I want one of those. If I could have any car in the world, it'd be, a Maserati, right? Cam Newton, who could probably buy 100 Maseratis, he's going to have more self-discipline in that area, right? He's going to be like, oh, bro, I already got that. So now when he sees a Maserati flying behind him, he's going to be like, oh, that's nothing to me, right? That's how it should be. if you're constantly going to having these meetings every single day where the opportunity to be promiscuous or to, you know, to get something comes about you, you know, every single day of every minute of every single day, well then that shouldn't bother you. It shouldn't strike anything within you. You should be able to be like, oh man, she's like every other female I come across, right? So I call BS, because at that point, if you're going to use that logic, well then you should have more self-discipline and self-control than the average man, because you come across those opportunities more than the average man. So let's see how Jason combats that system of logic.
About me going places and not being recognized, maybe not to your level, of course. It shouldn't be as equal as that. But I've been in situations in LA with my brother Matt Barnes and my good friend Vic, smooth brother as well. Women literally like, where y'all from? What you do? Brother the janitor, buff at a school. Teachers want to holler at him, same temptation. I've been in situations where I'm talking in rooms with women, wanting a man who can actually tap into her inner being, her thoughts, that isn't just a monofaceted male or a male with just one gear. All he can do is hump on her. I work with single mothers with their sons, helping their sons navigate through their father wounds and even mother wounds and failing in school. You think there's no temptation of women trying to come on me?
We all have temptation.
Yeah, but
the degree of temptation.
But see, man, I'm gonna talk. How old are you, Cam?
Like 53.
Yeah, and I already can kind of tell where Jason's going at. Cam is trying to hide behind of like, oh, but it's a greater temptation. Bro, temptation is temptation. I mean, Jesus was in the wilderness fasting for 40 days, and Satan was like, you know, turn this to food or whatever the case may be. No one's gonna come to Jesus and be like, bro, I fasted for 60 days, and Satan would, you know what I mean? The temptation is temptation because that's what you desire, right? Like how Jason was getting at with the single woman. You're going to desire a man who can handle business, but at the same time can handle you from an emotional standpoint. That desire, that temptation is going to be the same level in their mind. That woman, that single woman, that's a 100 on a scale, right? 100 out of 100. That's a level of temptation. That she would grade that as a 100. Whereas Cam Newton would see a fine woman walking by, and the temptation not to do anything is going to be a 100 for him. So it's like there is no like. But the degree of temptation, that's not a thing, bro. That's not a thing. That's, at that point, that's like saying pain has a scale, right? You can't tell the mother who saw her 16-year-old son die to gun violence that her pain was less because, oh, I watched my 3-year-old die to gun violence. That doesn't equate. And in that example, they're both children dying. But okay, let's say, you know, a widow. Right, she lost her husband to cancer. You can't say that her pain is less because, oh, well, at least he wasn't shot at the age of 3. Pain is pain. There is no measure. That's a cop out. There's no measure of pain. There's no measure of temptation. There's no measure of sin. Sin is sin, right? I can't sit here and be like, well, if you practice LGBTQ type stuff, well, you're going to hell. I was a prideful person. If I stayed in my pride, I'm going to hell too. Sin is sin. There is no like, you know, well, it's okay because I'm not gay. That's not how that works, bro. And so that's just a faulty mindset for Cam to have. It's a worldly concept. It's a carnal mindset to have. It sounds good to the ears and it sounds intellectual to the ears, but it's all junk. It's all BS.
I'm gonna turn that around 35.
Close.
All right. So you're young enough to be my son, and I say that respectfully because you got an amazing father. David told Solomon before he died to show himself a man. When I look at you and what you've accomplished on the field of football, you're a warrior, son. I don't care what position I put you in, you'll handle it if you train right. The issue isn't, son, that you lack discipline. You've shown that. You're here now. You got discipline. You got self-control. Look at all you've accomplished. What you're lacking is the self-love piece. Things have happened in your life that triggered what's happening now. The Super Bowl, for instance, which I, again, salute you for being transparent. Everyone can talk about why didn't he jump on the ball? Now, one thing you say is your analogy you were saying, what I can't relate to is being in Super Bowl 50, right?
Yes, sir.
Beast quarterback. Like you were my son's top dog.
Yes, sir.
Everyone was pulling for y'all to win. That I knew in my sphere of influence. I ain't never been in that position. Millions of people watching. Ball gets knocked out of my hand. Just that moment of hesitation. Like I teach in fighting, self-defense. Guy has a knife. This moment of this will get you killed. You got to respond. In that moment, because I watched it again, hearing the commentators like, now that's applicable. You put them in that situation, it's different. That's high pressure. But I share all of that to say, brother, every man, this is a good analogy, has the ball knocked out of their hands sometime. And we hesitate to dive on it.
Okay, if there's one AI site builder you need to meet, it's this dope tech from Wix.
In life, that could be like for me, I use myself for example. I got my wife now, Nicole, pregnant out of wedlock. Very dishonorable to her father, who was a pastor. Instead of, I did hesitate. It took me over 4 years to marry this woman. I wasted so much time. We've been married 27 years. But I finally dove on the ball. What I'm saying is, son, is that situation was so heavy. I'm just watching it today. If you haven't really unpacked that, like really, it will morph into other areas in your life where you hesitate. I talk to a lot of men about being married. They can love the woman, desire to be with her. They always say, well, Mr. Wilson, I need to get a little more money. Mr. Wilson, I need to get this house. You know what? Maybe when I get this business going, I'll go ahead and lock that in. I said, me and my wife, we got it together. I didn't have money, a lot of money. My wife is a nurse. You put that together, that's why the scriptures say it's not good for man to be alone. The woman in Hebrew, the word helper is Azah, which also means a shield, succor, support. So many of us, when you look at what's happening in our community, we're missing that. Especially when studies come out that show that over 80% of millionaires are married. What are we missing? Majority of us.
This is exactly when he mentioned, oh my God, when he said 80% of millionaires are married, that's exactly what I'm talking about. So for you to kind of hide behind the like, my degree of temptation is greater because I'm out here networking, I have to go to dinners. That's a millionaire's lifestyle, bro. They're constantly in meetings, they're constantly having to network and mingle and da-da-da. Politicians, I won't get into that because politicians they be doing some dirty, wild stuff, so I won't even dive deep in that. Especially as an active duty airman, I won't go down that route, but y'all get what I'm trying to say. Like how he said though, 80% of millionaires are married, so it's like you can't fall behind the whole, well, I gotta mingle, my life is all about being with different people, and so the temptation is a degree higher. Oh, that's all BS. But what I really want to get at is, I love how Jason mentioned that a helper is actually a shield. I'm gonna have to try to find that image, but there's an image of a wolf, right? And it was the alpha male of that wolf pack, and then it was like his the female or whatever that so they're, you know, a little wolf couple or whatever you would call that, but it shows the alpha male of the wolf kind of like snarling, and then the wife, I say wife, but you get what I mean, it's like it's protecting his neck, she's protecting his neck, guarding him, right? And so to me, when I first saw that and came across that image, it hit me, because it was like, that's how marriage, that's how a true partnership should be. And it's across the board, but it's more beautiful when it's a marriage, but it's across the board, right? From a marital standpoint, right, you have the husband and then you have the wife, you know, hey, I'm gonna hold you here, babe, so you can focus on this. But then even from a partnership, right, Jesus, right, tells me to, the way he's impacted me as a single mom now and my daughter, it's like I'm now the alpha male that's focusing on this, and Jesus is the one protecting my neck, saying, you know, you walk out, I'm walking out what he's called me to do, and then I'm trusting that he's guarding my neck, right? And so that's why, you know, the name, you know, Lions of Judah, because I had a dream, and I'll be very quick with this. I had an encounter. It wasn't even a dream. I had an encounter where my spirit man had noticed that there were these three men that were waiting. I was like in a motel room, it kind of looked like, and there was these three men waiting, and I just knew that they were trying to get to my daughter, and I knew within my spirit that they wanted to rape her. And so I felt defeated because in where we were at, there was only one way in and one way out. So they knew that they just had to wait me out. And so it gets to a point where now it's nighttime, and I just knew, like, now that it's dark, they're gonna try it, right? They're gonna take their shot. And right before they bust the door open and they charge at my daughter, I get in front of my daughter, so I'm in between them and my daughter, and I just see the shadow of this huge lion come up from behind me, and he eats them. I see him devour all three of them, and then I immediately wake up, and that transformed my life. That's when I decided to surrender to God completely, because not only as a single mom, having the protection of my child meant a lot to me. It hit my heart seeing God act that way, but then also knowing that I'm not alone. Like, as a single mom in the physical world, I have to wear so many hats. I have to discipline her. I have to be nurturing. I have to speak wisdom, but then I also have to let her be a kid. And so there's just a lot of hats that I'm having to put on and navigate. So knowing that Jesus is there behind me, he's my rear guard, like he's there behind me, but also watching my neck, it just the amount of relief that I felt, right? And so that's also why I decided to surrender my life to him. But I just love the picture of what a true partnership really should be like, and that's beautiful to me. And so I love what Jason Williams is getting at.
Versus fear. And then the inadequacy piece, the imposter syndrome. Now when I get married, I can't be a stoic. Oh, she's going to find out that I'm depressed sometime. She's going to find out that, man, I still struggle with confidence. I'm really not the leader she thinks I am, for her to be around me all day long. That's why I say, man, it's not the lack of discipline. It's not even self-control. Those are fruits of the seeds that have been planted. So if you don't have the right seeds and the right soil, your manifestation over the bad fruit is what we're seeing now in so many men.
So many men is me. The example that you gave, self-love, as far as the Super Bowl, and I'm trying to regurgitate, the things that you kind of mentioned. I did unpack that.
Excellent.
I think the thing that I have an issue with is I knew and know right from wrong. I just don't always do right.
What the scripture say about that?
Whoa, man, amazing car. When did you become a millionaire?
What is this for?
We're trying to get advice for the...
It's the basic definition of sin. To know the right thing to do and not do it, to him that is sin. So if I'm talking to you, my son, as a young man of the Most High.
I think this would be a quick comment. This is kind of very interesting because, see, Cam Newton, and I'm not just talking about this specific video, but there's other videos where he's kind of, he puts on that badge of like, yeah, I'm a son of a pastor, and you know how he's trying to talk about, we see him trying to interject when, Jason brings up David, and he's like, oh yeah, that's Bathsheba, right? And so there's kind of like, I don't want to say arrogance, but there's kind of like, oh, I know about Christianity, and I know, but he uses it in a way to try to justify what he's doing, and so it's interesting now to kind of see him going on that road, and then Jason challenges him with, what does the scripture say about that? And then Cam is speechless. And so it's like, yeah, like let's stop speaking on things that we don't know and just say we don't know. You know what I mean? Like it's you're misrepresenting something, and you do something a disservice when you misrepresent it at its core, right? Like I can't, for example, I won't speak if I have a Muslim person come to me, or if I have a Muslim who's practicing Islam and comes to me and wants to kind of have this conversation about, their religion versus my religion, that kind of a thing, right? There's some stuff that I'm just not going to touch on because I'm not going to speak from a place of ignorance, right? I can't be like, oh, well, your religion is based off of violence. Is that what I've seen in some cases? Yeah, but I also don't know what the core of that religion is, right? So I can't just speak on something that I don't know, and I hate how much non-believers try to speak on Christianity as a faith when there's so much of it that they haven't even studied or known. Like you're working off of feelings, what you feel Christianity is, and what it's done to you and how it's impacted you, and then what you've seen from third parties. So I've seen pastors cheat on their wives, and so now you're saying, well, the church is full of hypocrites. Okay, well, that's been your experience. But from a foundational level, that's not what Christianity is about. It actually condemns that kind of behavior. You know what I mean? So I hate to see people try to put on this badge like they know what it is that they're talking about, and then when you challenge them to go beyond the surface, then it's like it's crickets, right? So I just it that bugs me. It's a pet peeve of mine. But I do appreciate Cam's humbleness, right? Like when he said so many men is really me. Like I appreciate that he's being humble. He's being humble. There's a little bit of degree of like arrogance and pride though that kind of comes out as like pseudo humility. You know what I mean? So that kind of it's a little irritating to see.
You got to change that.
Yeah, but it also saying about we all fall short his glory.
But it also says that we are not to abuse his grace.
Yeah, and also say
See, I didn't even see this clip, and I was just see what I said about how like this little bit of pride. See how he's going tit for tat. Oh, but the Bible also says we all fall short. Yeah, but what does the Bible say sin is? And then the Bible does say, oh, but King David did do right. And then Jason's like, yeah, but it says don't take advantage. You see what I mean? So it's like again, you're fighting something that you don't truly understand, right? You're trying to wield a sword without knowing how to use it. So again, it's funny, right? And this is what the Bible talks about when it says observe the fruit, right? I don't know Cam as a person, but his fruit is telling me that there's a little bit of pride there, there's a little bit of arrogance there, there's a little bit of using the Bible to try to justify my behavior, right? And I don't even know Cam, from Adam, but I kind of hit that on the nail on the head, right, before we even got further into the video. So it's funny, man. It's funny to see.
we could go back and forth.
Yeah, so what does it really come down to? It comes down to who's really living it,
Yeah.
and who's just talking it.
And you can talk it, but if I ain't with you every single day, I can't hold you
Come to
accountable.
Detroit.
No, I don't go to Detroit.
But real talk though, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but see again,
Every case is different, and that's
listen, brother. There's always a principle to everything.
Mhm.
When you look at lust, brother, it just is what it is. It affects all walks of life. It even affected Job, that he made a covenant with his eyes that he wouldn't look lustfully at a woman, and they don't dress the way they do now as they did back then.
That's not realistic in my life, though.
What's not realistic?
To not look at a woman.
Lustfully was the key word.
Yeah, but how can you control if you look at
Fear
something?
of Yah is the beginning of all wisdom and knowledge. See, if we were coaching right, and I'm saying,
Look how defensive Cam is getting, right? Like that's not realistic. Yeah, it is. It is if you practice self-control. So this is why I always clap for people when they're trying to do something that's like not easy, but when you're trying to do something that like fundamentally you've always, like for me, right, as a person who was under the bondage of rejection, I say it comes off as, Sergeant Barnes is humble. It's actually fear. What they don't realize is I was actually practicing fear. I didn't feel worthy enough to get that medal. I didn't feel worthy enough to get that decoration. I didn't feel worthy enough to be rated so highly on my, annual evaluation report, right? They see it as, on the outside though, it projects as Sergeant Barnes is humble. She does her job and she's humble about it. In reality though, because I know me, I know that that's fear. It's a fear of success. It's a fear, you know what I mean? And so what I'm getting at here is, this is why I commend. So for me, knowing that I used to battle that thing, now I'm more bold. Now I'm going to put myself in for that award because God says that I'm worthy of that. I'm going to claim that my promotion to Master Sergeant is coming because I know what God has for me. His word says that I am created in his image. So then he must think worthy of me, so much so that he sent his son to die for me, right? So I can't sit back and say I'm not worthy of these things, right? The Bible even says that the wealth of the wicked is laid up for the righteous. So how can I say that I'm not worthy of living a life of financial stability, right? So we got to get, this is why I commend people. My point here is when you hear certain men saying that they're practicing, I don't want to get too non-PG-13 here, but men who practice like semen retention and they're practicing like self-control and abstinence and celibacy and that kind of thing, I commend them for that because that is so, in today's world where you're high-fiving somebody based on their body count, that's very hard to do because the amount of jokes that they're probably getting from their homeboys and all this kind of stuff, like, so to again pick up your cross and die to yourself in such a way that's commendable, because you see here how Cam is like, well, that's not realistic. It is, because people are doing it. You know what I mean? So you can't sit here and be like, well, that's not realistic. You know? So I commend people who are proving that to be not the case, proving that line of thinking wrong. And this is where the conversation is going to get tricky, because I can already see that Cam Newton is starting to kind of put on his defensive mechanism is coming. He's starting to kind of put his walls up. So this is going to get interesting.
And Cam, man, I need you to. And I'm not a fanatic. I'm not in the sports. So I'm trying to make. So if I don't sound like I know football, forgive me, brother.
Trust me.
But if my play is Cam, I need you to quarterback sneak it from the 20-yard line to the 50.
That's a hell of a touch.
Yeah. Now, where you're communicating with me, I can't do that. I ain't never been. That's ridiculous. It's impossible to do that.
No, I never said it's impossible.
Well,
I said that's not realistic.
If it's not realistic, meaning it can't happen. If it's not realistic,
Mr. Jason, right? Do you know my reality?
Tell me your reality.
Okay.
Yeah, at this point, he's not even listening at this point. He's listening to argue. He's not listening to understand at this point. Which is probably why he's going to keep falling into the same cycle. Because yes, that was a very good point. If I tell you hey, I want you to come down as a basketball, right? I'm a basketball person. I played basketball growing up. Shooting a 30-foot shot was unheard of until Curry started doing it like it's a free throw, right? So like, I agree with Jason. I'm saying something and all I'm hearing is excuses. That's not realistic. Oh, that's not part of today's society. Do you understand my reality? I get it, Cam. You're an attractive young man who has, the world is your oyster. That's not a crutch. Don't make that a crutch. There's other successful people who are single and are not doing what you're doing. You know what I mean? So I get where Jason's coming from. As a coach, if I tell you to do this, all I'm hearing is, well, I can't do that, I can't do that. And he's trying to be like, well, I didn't say it was impossible. Well, you said it wasn't realistic, which is the same thing. That literally is synonymous. That's the same thing. If I tell my daughter, hey, I want you to jump and touch the ceiling fan, she's going to be like, that's impossible. I'm going to be like, yeah, because it's unrealistic. What 7-year-old is going to be able to jump and touch the ceiling? It's the same thing. It's the same thing. So we'll probably wrap up here shortly, because I can already tell that this probably isn't going to go anywhere. Because it's very hard to combat. Pride is very hard to combat. I often say like the spirit of Jesus is what tears down the hardiness of heart. The hardiness of heart is pride. We see that with the Pharaoh, right? And the whole Exodus, right? The whole, let my people go, and the Pharaoh, it took 9 plagues, and then finally God, the Bible says that God allowed the Pharaoh's heart to be hardened because he knows it's not going anywhere, right? It's almost kind of like you're talking to somebody, and they're not paying attention, like you're just talking to a brick wall, and so instead you just kind of shut up and you just hit him with that, like, you got it, bro, you right. That's essentially what God did. He was like, okay, well, this isn't going to go anywhere, so we're just going to move on to the next phase, which is going to be the plagues, right? And so it's very hard to combat pride. So we'll probably wrap up here shortly, because like I said, I can kind of tell this might not go anywhere unless Cam decides to be intentional about letting his walls down. Because Jason's coming at him respectfully. He's not, and it's very tough to have a spiritual conversation to someone who's so carnal, because like the Bible says, it's foolish to people who aren't spiritual. It doesn't make sense to them. And we can see it here that what Jason is saying does not make sense to Cam. It's like he's speaking Russian and Cam's trying to speak English, right? So we'll see how this ends up, but we'll probably wrap it up here shortly.
I have 3 baby mamas.
Okay.
Right?
Do I need some paper and a pen?
No, you don't.
I'm just messing. I'm just joking, man.
You feel me?
Yeah, come on.
3 baby mamas.
Yes, sir.
I've been labeled a homebreaker. Why you creating broken homes? Why you ain't marrying none of these women? But the reality that you have that covenant with your wife, 25, 26 years, 27. Your journey is completely different than my journey. All right? I've always stood on this principle because, like I said, I know right from wrong. I just don't always do right. I had a great figure of what marriage and love was in my household. So much so, I always said I grew up with 3-parent household. My mom, my dad, my grandmother. My grandmother, I've never seen my grandmother with another man outside of her deceased husband. She was a widow. I never seen her seductive. I even never seen her flirt. Never seen her even let another man touch her respectfully. I knew these things. But as you unpack your reality, and you know marrying is always a goal, not the goal. It's a goal.
What do you mean? You pointed to something. What do you mean by? What do you point?
Like it's a part of the journey. It's like a checkpoint.
Okay, let me go back then. First, I want to clarify. I know the right things to do as well, and don't always do it. Hence, why we have repentance in the blood of Christ. All right. I wanted to make that clear. Like, I'm not sitting here like I get it all right all the time.
Yeah.
As far as falling in that area of a lack of sexual self-control, I've been fighting really hard to maintain where I am. I want to finish strong. Now, let's just say, okay, my life isn't the same as yours, okay? I would agree the fact that you can go maybe to the mall and women just throw themselves at you, right? I got to go back to who we are in Yah, if you in Yah, right? To whom much is given, much is required. If you got much more, you've been entrusted with much more will be demanded. You can't just brush that off. Because you're telling me your life is different than mine, which is almost you're not saying it's an excuse for sinning, but listen, we all say it.
This is exactly what I was getting at. It's almost like he's saying his life was designed for him to fail in the arena of sin because you don't know my reality and my degree of temptation. That doesn't mean nothing, bro. That doesn't mean nothing. Jesus had the ability to call down legions of angels and decided not to do it. That's self-control. That is self-control. There is, life is but a vapor, bro. It's all vanity. Like, you don't get to sit here and, I won't even go down that road because then we'll be here forever. But I think you guys get what I'm trying to get at. Is, even Jason's kind of trying to call him out on it. Like, it almost sounds like you're trying to say your life, which should be, your blessing. It's a magnitude of blessing that God has given you. You're trying to say, it gives you, an excuse to sin. It's a pass to sin because temptation is everywhere. That's everybody. That's everybody. As a single woman, I can say every time I see a good-looking man, I want to sleep with him, or I'm going to make that person my husband. That's everywhere, bro. That doesn't change just because the status symbol or the life you live. That's temptation is everywhere. You're living in a fallen world. Temptation is everywhere. So self-control is even way more important because the world you're in itself is fallen. It's polluted. It's corrupted. So you don't get a pass because you're Cam Newton. That's not how life works, buddy. You don't even get a pass because you're King David. You don't even get a pass because you're King David. And David didn't get a pass. He lost. He was forced into the wilderness. King Solomon did not get a pass. Your status, your life, your wealth, none of that. That's not an excuse, and it's not a license to sin. It's all BS. I call BS.
You'll say it greater than the next one.
Hebrews chapter 10, 26. The one who willingly sins, willingly is a key word. There no longer remains a sacrifice for his sins. So if I go out here and kill everybody in this room and don't repent, where am I going, brother? It is written that our name could be taken out of the book of life. So I go back again. You have been given and entrusted with much. You have. To whom much is given, much more will be demanded.
I'm not saying that, and I don't want people to, especially you as we're having this conversation, I don't want people to take that as I'm better than, or it's...
I'm sorry. Can I just be clear? I'm sorry. I don't want you to misconstrue what I'm saying. You just when we met before here, you don't even give that vibe, brother.
Yes, sir.
All right. I didn't mean that. What I'm meaning is when you say your life is different than mine.
Different.
I'm talking about the temptation. Let's stay on topic. So that's what I'm saying. Brother, it's a gift of who you are, what you've been through, and your influence.
Right.
It's supposed to be used for the kingdom.
Yes.
Samson's strength was for the kingdom, but he laid with the wrong woman.
Delilah.
Yeah, and she took him out. And he prayed, Abba, give me strength one more time, and I'll crush all these Philistines. He died before his time. The scripture says you be overly foolish, you'll die before your time.
I'm familiar.
Yeah, so that's all I'm saying to you is this. I agree with you. I can't sit here and say people will recognize me, but if you walk somewhere publicly and I walk somewhere publicly, I may get to where I'm going. No, I will get to where I'm going faster than you would.
Yeah.
People will stop you.
I think I was saying that to the individual that are not graceful with what has happened, right? Going back to the Shannon Sharp situation. Okay. Well, for me, as I'm talking about my reality, right, knowing right from wrong and not always choosing right, my fear of divorce is greater than my desire to get married.
So give me that. I appreciate you saying that.
So today's the day. I've got my RTA mock system and Coyote appliances. And
you just identified one issue that's stopping you. But we know God didn't give us a spirit of fear. He gave us a spirit of power, love.
And again, I appreciate Cam being humble here to say that his fear of divorce is higher than his desire to get married. I appreciate that. But again, you see the arrogance of him being like, well, I'm familiar. Oh, that's Delilah, right? Like, okay, dude, we get it. You're the preacher's kid. But your ignorance is still showing in a sense. So, like, let's get off the high horse of like, oh, I know scripture. I was raised in the church. Like, let's get off that high horse and just engage in conversation with one another. Let's remove the scales off each other's eyes and just kind of have a genuine conversation. Versus like this, almost kind of like this tit for tat of who has the most spiritual knowledge. It's kind of what it's giving. But like he said, that's a fear. That's a fear. You have a fear that you'll never attain or achieve the marriage that you saw emulated, like how he mentioned the three, right? His grandma, his mom, and his dad. And so you're not even. It's almost kind of like, I know I'm not going to get the home run, so I won't even step up to the plate. That's basically what he's saying he's doing. And so, yeah, that's fear, dude. You gotta. I hate to sound kind of uncaring, but like you gotta get over that, or insensitive. Like you gotta get over that. Like he said, God didn't give us a power, fear. He gave us a sound mind, a spirit of power, right? And so you gotta get over it. You gotta get over that mindset. The same way, and I'm not even just gonna be insensitive towards Cam. It's the same way with me. I had to get over my fear of success, my fear of not measuring up to what God has called me to do. I gotta get over that, because at the end of the day, faith is doing something that you don't know. I know I'm not qualified to bring my daughter in I've only accumulated a certain level of success, right? Let's say that's this. I'm not qualified to bring anybody higher than that, right? Faith is me trusting that God is going to bridge that gap. This is where I want my daughter to be, but this is where I've only been able to get. I'm trusting in God to bridge that gap to get my daughter to here. That's faith. Faith is saying, I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills today, but I'm gonna go to the bank and trust that that God is going to sign off on the loan before I even get to the bank. That's faith. So like faith is an action. It's not just a hope that we believe in. It's an action. And so it's hard to juggle. It's hard to juggle that though. It's hard to speak that to someone who doesn't know and who doesn't believe, but is talking in a way that they think that they know and that they believe. So yeah. Jason's got his work cut out with Cam.
That's self-control, boy.
In him, not a human.
What you mean?
Like
in what?
In him.
In him what?
I believe in him.
To what? You just said
my fear of divorce is greater than my desire
to get married. I heard you. I want to make sure, because you said something else.
Yeah.
So let me make sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying, in layman's terms, that what's preventing you from marrying any of these women is your fear of being divorced.
Yes.
Just want to make sure I understood that.
Yes.
All right, now I'm talking about fear. It does not come from Most High. It is written that fear comes from the devil. He did not give us a spirit of fear. Most High gave us a spirit of power, love, and sound mind or discipline. That's what I'm saying. I love the fact, brother, that you identified it. Most men will continue living promiscuous lives, running from their calling and their purpose because of that fear. The Bible says that Satan prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he can devour. When I studied that, it's deep. The lion roars to scare the prey into where he wants them to go. That's why the roar is important, the fear. That's why it says do not be fear over 300 times in the scriptures. I'm proud of you. So now we got to move past fear into purpose. He's giving you all of this. I want to come back to the Most High empty. I don't want to leave here with my cup full. There are many days I cry from fatigue, wanting my life, why can't I be like the normal Christian and go do this and do some right things and do a little bad things?
Yeah.
He didn't die for me to compromise. Brother, who you are, he's giving it to you not as a crux or a crutch, but as a power. So what triggers the fear? What have you seen in...
He just said it. He didn't give you all this to use it as a crutch, bro. Like, oh, well, my degree of, temptation is, and you don't know my reality. Don't use that as a crutch. Because I could say that I don't know how to be a single mom because I came from a 2-parent household and then just be a terrible mom to my daughter. I'm not using that as a crutch. I could say I don't know what it is to handle money properly because my mom's identity was stolen when we were younger, and so it took almost like a decade plus for my dad to financially get us right back on the same track, right? And so I could say, like, now that I'm in the military and I'm making decent money, and now that it's just me and my daughter, there's an excess of money now, so I could lean on the crutch of, like, I don't know what it is to steward money well because my parents never had this much money, like that. We can't use the blessings of God as a crutch of ignorance. Like, you got to have some self accountability. You got to have some you got to be accountable not only to yourself, but like how he said, to the Most High God, right? To whom much is given, much is required. Jason is hitting the nail on the head. There's so many times where I'm just like, why can't I just be like how he said the other Christians? I'm the same way. Like, why can't I just give that person a piece of their medicine? Why can't I just, treat my ex the way he treats me, right? Because he's not involved with my daughter at all. So it'd be so nice to be able to just go back and hit him with the same verbal, spears that he hits me with, and blah, 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 and, and God's like, but what if, I know better, because God has shown me things and told me certain things. So it's almost kind of like how God says, the speck in your own eye. He's like, no, I'm dealing with you, though. I told you, and I showed you what I called you to do and want you to do and how to walk this out. So me choosing to do otherwise is a slap to God's face, because he's like, I showed you specifically of how to handle this situation. Don't mind them. Focus on what I told you, right? And so I totally get where Jason's coming from.
About, I guess, divorce that makes you... I'm asking. I'm not being sarcastic. I want you to talk. Tell me.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, bro.
Personally, not in the news. Because we done seen tons of stuff in the news. Personally.
We have got to the point where literally anybody can build a fully working app without knowing how to code. This is...
I would label myself like the black sheep of the family. Right?
Mm-hmm.
My older brother, my mom had 3 sons. My older brother, he's married. Happily married. Beautiful family. Then comes me. My younger brother, happily married. Don't have kids yet. They got 2 dogs. They're like the most theatrical, perfect little situation. I admired that.
Mm-hmm.
Not just my younger brother, but my older brother. And also my father. Real examples, I know what marriage is. I have great examples. But there also was a thing that said, what would Jesus do? Correct?
Who created that?
Man.
Okay, so we
all want to be like Jesus,
yeah,
right?
Okay.
Jesus wasn't married.
Bro, son, come on. How long was Jesus here?
33 years.
How long was his ministry?
A lifetime.
3. Well, when he was... he ministered his entire life, because at 12 he was teaching in the synagogue.
Mm-hmm.
But they say, scholars or theologians say 30, and then he lived 3 years in accomplishing all that he needed to do. Now, you use him as an example, but throughout, let's go to the beginning.
Yeah, we'll wrap this up shortly, because, like I said, it's almost like this arrogant tit for tat is what Cam Newton is trying to come at to try to justify his behavior and all that kind of stuff. So like I said, I don't think this conversation is going to go anywhere. Unfortunately, I feel like most of what Jason is dropping is gems, and I feel like it's just kind of landing on deaf ears. It's kind of landing on what the Bible would say, like a stony heart, stony ground. And so we won't watch the whole thing of this, because it's 2 hours long. We're an hour and a half in. So, but the thing about Jesus not being married, I get Jason almost kind of dropped his guard. He's like, "Come on, bro." It's like, and he corrected himself. But it's because what, bro? What? Jesus wasn't married. First off, there's nowhere in the Bible that says every person on this earth is gonna get married and have a family. Like it's family itself is actually a ministry. It's not everyone. The same way not everyone is called into the fivefold ministry, not everyone is called to have a family, let alone be married, right? And Jesus himself wasn't even brought on. Jesus was brought on this earth to bring salvation to the Jews first and the Gentiles, right? That's what Paul says in the New Testament. Jesus' whole ministry was to bring salvation to the world. Jesus' ministry was not to have a family and to walk out. He came, he had a mission, he did that mission, he was brought up. That was it, right? It's a human mindset for us to think that life isn't complete until we've achieved something, whether it be financial status, whether, I want to be a millionaire, whether it's family, I want to have a husband and children, whether it's all that stuff. The idea of what success is, that's a man-made concept. That's not a heavenly concept. A heavenly concept is doing what God told me to do. That's success. If God told me to do something and I did it, I'm caught up into heaven. I did my job. I completed my mission. That's success. This earth, this physical realm of success is what tells us that you got to have children, you got to have the white picket fence, you got to be able to have money to invest so you can leave a legacy behind for your children. That's a man-made concept. That's not a heavenly concept. So to be like, oh, well, Jesus wasn't married. It's like, okay, and like, I don't, what are you getting at? Now, if you're trying to say, if you're using Jesus not being married as a concept of like, hey, you can be unwedded and have no children and still make it into heaven because you completed the your God-given mandate, your ministry, your calling on your life, then yeah, by all means, yeah, Jesus is the template for that. But don't make it seem like you're justified in your behavior because you're unmarried and Jesus was unmarried too. Like that's, yeah, I don't know what he was hoping to get out of that example, but I digress. Like I said, we'll wrap up here in a little bit to get this going.
The goal is one man, one woman, one flesh. 2, which is 1 and 1, equals 2, become one flesh. Mm-hmm. That's scripture. Okay, so real quick.
But I just need to hear this.
Mm-hmm.
Was Jesus married or not?
I already answered that.
I didn't hear you.
No, he was not married. Okay.
Keep making your point.
Okay. Well, we can stay there.
Mm-hmm.
What is your point? Did he preach against marriage? What did Jesus say the reason why Moses allowed for divorce?
Infidelity.
No.
What? Adultery. It wasn't adultery?
Mm-mm. Remember, the Most High is...
Case in point. See, you preaching on something you know nothing about. You trying to have a theological discussion and you ain't even read the word. Like it. And this is why I'm saying it. The issue of pride is so prevalent, and it's so hard to fight against because you gotta actively. I can't pray that away off of you. You have to be intentional about submitting and being humble and having ears to listen and not to argue. And that's the problem that we're seeing here. He's got ears to argue, not to listen. He doesn't want to humble himself. He wants to justify himself and his behavior. And so that's what we're seeing here. So it's tough because seeing somebody like Jason Wilson trying to drop gems and give off so much wisdom and it falling on stony ground, it's kind of heartbreaking to see. It's such a missed opportunity on Cam's part to try to grow.
See, when you're running or escapism, you think because the Most High allowed something that he approved it. Yeshua, Jesus said that Moses allowed...
Exactly. Allowing something to happen is not the same as excusing it to happen. Allowing David to have all these wives and concubines doesn't excuse, right? Because God's mission was to establish the promise that he made regarding the throne of David was his focus. So yeah, your infidelity or whatever, not necessarily the thing that I'm focusing on because I'm trying to bring about a promise. It'll get addressed, but it's not what I'm focused on. So like how Jason's saying, allowing something to happen is not condoning it. I can allow my child to have a temper tantrum because she's 7, but I'm not going to condone the behavior. You're not just going to keep on going to Walmart and having a fit every time you can't grab a Snickers, right? So it's like allowing something to happen isn't the same as condoning it. Because I can allow my daughter who's 7 to have a temper tantrum, but I'm not going to condone a 27-year-old doing that, right? Like, you should know better. So it's a slippery slope that Cam Newton is traveling on.
Allowed them that certificate of divorce because the people's hearts were hardened.
Pride.
It's not his will, son. It's not. Truth is truth. It's not what we can make it. It can't. It's solid. It stands on something. Yahushua's mission wasn't to come here to have a family. His mission was to come here and show us the way and die for our sins and rise again on the 3rd day.
Salvation.
And give us salvation, access to the Most High, which we didn't have. He was locked in.
Hey everybody, it's Tony Robbins here with my dear friend Dean Graziosi. Listen, I want to call your attention to an earth-shattering change that's happened.
So that's the danger in having a fear. I'm not saying you have a fear-based mind, but when we allow fear, or when we look through the lenses of fear, it changes really the perspective or perception of what he's trying to show us. Let me give you an example.
My example's still pending too.
What example still pending?
I didn't give you the example of.
Okay, okay.
I was trying to tell you, know what I'm saying?
Well, long as we clear on why Jesus wasn't married.
That's cool.
Okay, cool. Go to your examples about what makes you fear divorce.
Most recently?
Yeah, we'll just end here, because, it's not even, he didn't even take anything in. You're going to bring Jesus up as an example of whatever you were trying to bring him up for. Jason tries to give you some wisdom about that, and then that just completely goes off because you're focused on, well, I didn't even get to bring up my example. Like, okay, I digress. You're not even here to understand anything. You're here to prove a point, and it's not going to go anywhere. So I applaud Jason Wilson for trying. He came in with good intentions to drop wisdom. Cam Newton did not want to receive it. He just wanted to justify, and that's fine. So we'll stop here because like I said, I even told you guys about 45 minutes ago, I could tell this conversation's not going to go anywhere. And it wasn't a slight to Cam. It's just, you got to see the spirit of what you're working with. I'm not talking to Cam. I'm talking to the spirit that's behind Cam, that's influencing Cam, and that's a spirit of pride. It's a spirit of rebellion. It's very hard to, those two together, they're strongholds for a reason, because there's strength in pride, right? So they're once you, especially for someone who's dealing with the ministry of deliverance, once you see something for what it is, you kind of already know the outcome, because like that's why the Bible says test them. You'll know them by their fruit. I know that from what Cameron is displaying, that it's a spirit of pride behind that, and so I can kind of predict where it's going to go, because I already know how those spirits operate. So we'll stop there. Those are my remarks on this video. It's unfortunate that what Jason was saying was kind of, like I said, landing on stony ground, the hardiness of heart, the pride, that kind of thing. Because I think this could have been a beautiful awakening, right? To see the scales fall off of Cam's eyes and to allow for some seeds to be planted that would lead to growth and transformation. And so it's kind of unfortunate to see that not be the case. But that doesn't mean that we stop trying as Christians. That doesn't mean that we stop pushing, trying to push something forward, right? We still got to try to push the kingdom of God forward. So, but like, that's all I got for this video. Let me know your thoughts. What do you guys think? Maybe would you handle this conversation any differently, right? Let me know what you guys think. Drop it in the comments. Keep on putting your videos, submitting those videos to me. Let's kind of keep the conversation going. You know what I mean? Let's stay engaged with one another and learn from one another, right? So that's all I got for you guys. I thank you guys for tuning in. Go ahead and drop those comments. Share this video. Like this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can have we can continue the dialogue. With, again, the mindset being, the goal being to open eyes and soften hearts, such is the case with this video. I believe that's what Jason was trying to do, open Cam's eyes and soften his heart a little bit so there can be some room to grow, and unfortunately we didn't see that happen. So we're just going to continue to pray for Cam Newton, continue to cover Jason Wilson in prayer, and we just keep on pushing, right? keep on pushing the kingdom of God forward, right? Despite the opposition. So that's all I have for you guys. I appreciate you guys. Continue to walk in peace, wisdom, and love, and let's move in light. All right. I'll see you guys in the next video.